Hello, everybody. Dave Neal here, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. We just shared with y'all the Becca Martinez take on Reality Steve's article regarding Nate's allegations. They gave Reality Steve a lot of credit for taking his opinion out of it, showing a bunch of evidence, and just letting the audience do with it as they want. And now we're going to discuss a different side of things. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals. I'm going to be going live right after this on Patreon, patreon.com/Dave Neal, for all the behind-the-scenes content. Unpacking the allegations of Nate's cheating. Juliet and Emma Gray weigh in on Reality Steve's role in the situation, examine all cheating allegations from Nate's past girlfriends, and touch on the position Nate is in while the show is airing. This podcast by Juliet Littman has not been well received by those on Reddit. A lot of people said, wow, you're going to accuse him of making this content because he's got a potential bias against people of color. We'll play this. We're going to get into it. And let's give these commentators the benefit of the doubt and the grace that they want us to give Nate. Let's give it to them as well and hear them out and see what they have to say about the story.
I don't even know if I should call him notes. I don't really know what to call them. Reality Steve had been teasing that he had dirt on one of the contestants. And he was like, I told you I wasn't going to do this anymore. This is my Reality Steve voice. Said I was going to back off, but I just felt like people had to know this.
Okay, so that's not true. Okay, what Reality Steve said was, I'm not going to share information unless people put their face and name to it. So I'm not going to share super scandalous stories unless it's coming from somebody. Essentially saying, I'm not going to take the fall and jump on the sword for someone else if they're not willing to show their face. There's a difference there, okay? It's very important. We're about 1 minute into the podcast that we get this stuff right.
And so on Tuesday morning, after the episode in which it really seemed like Nate and Gabby were a done deal, he posted a series of texts or DMs with two women who were concurrently dating Nate in the year 2021. And one of them, if not both, you can correct me, Emma, didn't learn about his daughter until after they'd broken up and they dated for 18 months.
Just the one. I think the other woman who he only dated for, I think,
like
a few
3 months.
Yeah, she says that she knew about his daughter from about a week in, but the woman that he had a more serious relationship with dated a year and a half. She lives in Chicago, I believe.
Yes. There's in Atlanta.
Yeah, she did not know about his daughter, I think, until the Bachelorette aired.
Yes, I think that's what she said. And they started in... He had been married before as well. That also came out, has not been mentioned on the show, that clearly he had previous women in his life, as he has a daughter. Also, he's 33 years old, so it stands to reason he's dated other women. I think the marriage piece of it is like totally irrelevant to The Bachelor.
Well, so here's the deal. The marriage is irrelevant to The Bachelor, but he was married for, I think, 10 months of that time when he was with Kelsey. Not to say that the marriage wasn't dead as a doornail, but the divorce hadn't been finalized.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think that like there's actually a weird stigma around divorce on this show that like I'm actually glad it wasn't brought into it. And I wanted to talk to you today because the reason that this came out is Reality Steve is working under the premise that people needed to know this information about Nate. And so I guess my first question for you is, as commentators and viewers and presumably fans of The Bachelor and all associated spinoffs, did we need to know about this or should we know about it? I think for us, like, and I would say more as like fans than, as Bachelor Nation professionals, but we are both.
I guess the question is, on a show that's accused of having people on for the wrong reasons, should we be editing and promoting a guy who just got out of a relationship where he either love bombed or lied? Now, he says that he never defined the relationship. Okay, so we have to respect what he's saying. So it's a he said, she said situation. But this isn't a show about car mechanics. It's a show about finding love.
We are. I mean, I honestly have really complicated feelings about this. Like, I completely understand why, if you are a woman who has dated a man who is then being presented as having this like really high status and desirability to millions of people, that you would feel really crappy and that you would want to speak out about that. And I think that if you've had a shitty experience with any public figure, you are totally within your rights to share your experience and your story. What I feel a little conflicted about is first about whether Reality Steve is the correct vessel for this kind of story. You know, he isn't, I think he has become more of a responsible arbiter of this kind of information, but like he's not a trained journalist.
But speaking of trained journalists, they conflated at the beginning, in the first minute, they conflated Reality Steve's sort of full process. They kind of undermined what he does because Reality Steve says, I'm not going to comment on this unless someone puts their name in front of it and has evidence and this and that. And to their own admission at the beginning, they actually misconstrued that. And I'm sure it was, I'm sure they didn't mean to, but Juliette Littman, she's an American journalist, editor, American media personality. So the Ringer's this is a big production here. So I'm just saying in the first minute of your piece not against him, but trying to flesh this out, you'd think that they would do a little bit of a better job having their facts down.
Which, by the way, neither am I.
And I hate to say this, but this is why I watch like Breaking Points. You know, you get a Republican and a Democrat. They try to piece through the news to find the truth. I love Breaking Points. Huge Crystal Ball fan. Love her to death. This is why mainstream media people are so over, because they take what people say and they kind of just bend it. I mean, how many times have I gotten comments saying, well, basically what Dave is saying is this. No, it took me 23 minutes to get my thoughts out. So don't basically tell me what I'm trying to say.
I just want to note that as well. But seriously, I think it's relevant to the conversation.
That's the world I come from. So I guess that's kind of how I tend to think about these things, and the way that, you know, stories are vetted and the kind of judgment that is required to decide like whether information rises to the level of national news is what we're talking about.
So to answer their question, I'm not on anybody's payroll. I'm not on Reality Steve's payroll. I know this. I know he's taken it real seriously, the misreportings he's had in the past. I know this story, he had spoken with somebody's parents. He's spoken with probably 3, 4, maybe even more people. This story took him probably close to a month to put together. Okay. So whether he's got a degree from journalism school at Emerson or not, that doesn't mean he didn't do his due diligence. But I understand that he's had issues in the past with the Jenna Cooper situation where he got it wrong. So I understand in journalism, when you get something wrong, people have the right to doubt you moving forward. I get that.
I don't know. Then that launches this attack on Nate's character, and I feel really uncomfortable with just the way that sort of like opens up this investigation based on these two women's stories.
Now, so here comes the point. Of course, go listen to the full Bachelor Party podcast. But if Dave, you keep pausing it. This is what I do. Here comes the question: is Reality Steve responsible for an audience's handling of information? It's almost like WikiLeaks, right? They just dump things that, here you go, journalists, do with this information what you must. I don't offer any opinions. Here's all the information. It's kind of like that. Reality Steve offered close to zero opinions on this piece. He said, here's all the receipts. Here's the information. Take it. Do what you want. So is he morally responsible for protecting contestants and the audience and not sharing this sort of information?
And
I don't think
Nate, so. And this has happened in the past of the show. Nate's not really able to speak on this right now because all of his press is managed by Warner Brothers. And so it becomes like an issue that the show has control over. So it's like, it sucks for him that's actually happening at a time when he then, I think, contractually can't speak out.
So yeah, it does suck. But he did say this on the Mentel last night. He said he was trying to protect his daughter. These aren't exact quotes. This is a summary. And he said that he never had defined the relationship with them, but he could have done better. And he does apologize. Okay. So he admits to guilt in some ways, and he kind of in other ways says, but at the same time, we didn't define the relationship. And people might argue, well, sending people roses and meeting their family and going to weddings together, you would think would define the relationship. There was some emotional definition happening, if not through the linguistic art of defining whatever. You know what I mean? So let's just keep this party going.
break his contract, there would be a financial penalty for that. Or if not other kinds of penalties. And so
all right, so they say, well, he's not allowed to share his side of the story, but they're going to get it out. It'll be out in a few weeks, and I think audiences are doing a better job of waiting. At least I encourage that. I said it with Rachel Kirkconnell. I said, hey, clearly she's being silenced by the show, so be mad at the show for stoking this huge issue and not just letting her talk. Clearly she was trying to talk. She eventually goes against the show's better judgment, or at least what they thought was, and makes an Instagram story and video, and it completely doesn't solve the situation, but it gets it under control. So yeah, the show, even if it spoils aspects of the show, should have a dedicated PR person that can sit down and do a sort of like difficult questions segment with contestants on the fly, nip it in the bud. Look, people like me and other commentators will have less to talk about in some way because we won't be able to speculate. But I think we're putting on the cautious signals here and trying to deal with this as gracefully as possible. At least that's all I can preach. Now, what the audience does with it, with people's lack of critical thinking skills these days and rushing to judgment and everything's necessarily good and evil, that's up to them. I do know, I don't know if I'll play it in this clip, I do know Juliet and Emma Gray do a very good job of saying that the audience shouldn't see everything in black and white. They shouldn't see everything in good and bad, and I totally get that. That's really on the audience, though. That's on the audience being educated enough to realize that everything you see and hear isn't exactly the truth. It's curated through a TV show. That's on y'all, okay?
Because
now this is where it gets a little serious.
Ultimately, I feel bad for Nate, and I don't want to dismiss the...
So she says, ultimately, I feel bad for Nate. Real quick, I think you can feel bad for Nate. I think that's okay. I think it doesn't mean you can't feel bad for others. An empath, person who feels you can feel bad. I feel bad for people that have been canceled, even if they deserved it. You can just feel bad for people for being in a bad thing, in a bad situation, and he sure is. So I'm okay with that.
Other two women's experience. And I think if I were either one of them, I would be like really, really wounded and really upset. And so I in no way dismiss that. But I think because he can't really like speak on this in the same way, it just feels unequal, even though he's the one with fame and on TV. So I acknowledge the flaw in what I'm saying, but I think I just feel bad for him because...
So she feels bad that while he'll have a platform, he can't access it right now. I understand that.
He is like you said, so many other guys. He was a shitty lying boyfriend. And there's so many of those out there.
There unfortunately are. And I have no interest in defending Nate, or like, I wouldn't necessarily say I like feel bad for him, but I do. It just brings up these bigger questions for me about the larger structure of like, which stories are we deciding to elevate? Which stories are we deciding to tell? Like Steve's tone, he goes so hard. He was, in his blog about this, he was saying things like, just try Mike Fleiss. I dare you to make him the Bachelor. Like basically being like, I'm going to like crusade against this man every moment he's on screen. And like, again, this isn't an allegation of assault. And like in my reporting with Claire at HuffPost, we frankly have done months-long investigations on rape allegations involving men from this show that receive less attention than this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just like, what are we treating and with what level of importance? And I think it's really hard to negotiate that. And I'm not saying that to be like holier than thou. Like,
I think Reality Steve, if he had the same sort of evidence, would come forward. It's almost like a whataboutism. Well, if the audience didn't give so much weight to this other story, why should we give weight to this? It's like what about Hillary's emails? Well, let's just specifically talk about this story.
I certainly was like furious when the Jed stuff came out. You get so swept up in it, and you want these people to be the people that we're like the fantasy we're being sold on television, and so it punctures that. And like, my first reaction seeing the news was like, wow, this makes me feel queasy, and this is a huge bummer because I really wanted Nate to be the next Bachelor.
It is a bummer.
Nate's awesome, yeah. And I think, there's a couple of things here
Nate's
too.
Awesome.
One other thing, I don't really want to defend Nate either. I feel like I'm sometimes a contrarian, so then I'm just like, well, I'm going to defend him. But I do want to mention one thing, which is that it's beyond sucks what happened to this woman, Kelsey. Like, there's just, it sucks. I really feel for her. I really get it. I feel like Steve, and I don't think Kelsey did this. I think Steve, from what the information I have, but I think Steve tried to paint Nate as a bad father by the fact that he didn't tell Kelsey about his daughter. But I would just say on the flip side, clearly Nate was not invested in this relationship the way that Kelsey was.
So I give them credit for that. I don't think Steve was trying to imply anything. I think Steve had his opinions, but I don't think he was trying to imply anything. But obviously Nate wasn't into Kelsey in the way that Kelsey might have been into Nate, at least to the point where he was guarding his family, getting over, a divorce and all these things. But I don't think there was any proof that reality Steve was trying to paint Nate in any light other than what we all saw. I'm gonna play this next clip. It's heavy. Let's just play it and we'll address it from there.
Make that an aspect of this narrative that Steve is pushing forward, I think is really wrong and plays into the really troubling dynamics that a lot of the fan base of this show are a part of. And I think I just really want to mention that because it's so key to like why his alleged reporting is so irresponsible.
No.
Now, when we talk about the fan base of the show, the fan base is across the spectrum. I'm a progressive guy. I know my audience ranges from progressive to conservative, from woke to some that are racist. I know those people exist out there, whether it's implicitly or whatever. It's because it's a fragment of our country. The show being on network TV is not niched down. It is across the spectrum. We get phone calls from Atlanta to Texas to Nova Scotia, all over the map. So that audience will exist regardless of what reality Steve discusses.
I think that is a really important point and piece of this. That's like, it just does give you that icky feeling. And I think Jenna from Date Card Pod pointed out on Instagram that like, if you look at Steve's history of the people that he's gone really hard on recently, it does raise question marks, Nate, Tayshia, Matt James. Like, again, what sort of biases are you bringing into your decision-making in terms of, again, what rises to the level, not of shitty behavior, not even of things that like people need to know, but like of national news.
Now, I can't break down all of this, but I will say with Matt James, I think they're referencing the lady named Grace, who was sort of not booty called, but invited by Matt James to a club, and she shared her story. So it was another scenario where we had someone firsthand sharing their story about Matt, and to be honest, it probably actually helped his relationship out because after that, he wasn't official with Rachel Kirkconnell. And then the fallout of that, I think they ended up kind of splitting, and again the timeline's kind of rough. If anyone follows the story, the timeline's rough. And after that, he realized he wanted to be official with Rachel, and he kind of sought her out, and he decided he would change. So it kind of ended up working out well for him because maybe. I don't think he had ever told someone he loved them. Maybe he hadn't been in an official relationship before. So he kind of was able to lurk in the F-boy world that a lot of guys in their 20s lurk, and then called out. Rachel defined the boundaries, and then he rose to that level. They've been happily ever after, so we know it. But that he was the lead of the show. He was the lead of the show. To say that Reality Steve is treating Tayshia and Matt James differently than others would require more than just saying that. Show some evidence. Show some, bring that to the picture here because it's a pretty wild accusation. Some of the comments I'm going to read, we'll keep them anonymous here, from people someone said, that's so ridiculous. I don't love Reality Steve, but he literally showed so much proof of him getting facts and receipts and refusing to run the story until he had completely solid evidence. He was told stuff about Nate from the beginning and never mentioned it until he had women coming to him with the facts and asking for their story to be told, which is completely reasonable in my opinion. If a man treated me like that, then went on national TV, you best believe I'm sending Reality Steve all the tea and begging him to show the world. Now, we also have on Twitter, I lost the tweet. I'll go back to Twitter in a second and find the next version of that. But let's continue to listen.
Like, you have a national platform. The story's going to get picked up. What responsibility do you have in terms of like that judgment call? And that's really tough. Like, I'm not even fully saying like Steve is a bad guy. I don't know what I would have done if this information came to me necessarily. But like, I do think that by Steve's own admission, he gets a lot of messages every season about like the majority of people, especially the men, saying this person was shitty, this person did something shitty, this person's a bad guy. So like, is he giving the same treatment to every person? And
those are, I mean, I guess those are questions you can ask, but they're asking it in a way that's saying, like I said before, look, if you're gonna imply or question whether Reality Steve's acting with a racial bias or racial motivation, it's kind of hard for him to argue that, and you're not providing any other real tangible evidence there also. So some comments that they received on their Twitter, they said, we're unpacking all the Nate cheating allegations. Rodney said, Nate has been given an excellent edit by Bachelorette. Just curious if you'd be giving Nate the same benefit of the doubt if it were Tino or Logan. So again, I'm not here making this about race. The question by Bachelor Party is, and I guess my question for the audience, to you guys out there, is that a fair question to ask in a very isolated story with Nate and the boatloads of evidence that Reality Steve presented? Like, is the story not what Nate did, but more that Reality Steve, as a white man from Texas, is targeting him? I don't know, guys. I don't know. It sounds like a wild sort of take. I'd love to know more. Let me know what you guys think. I'll be live on Patreon at patreon.com/Dave Neal momentarily. We'll see you guys out there. Bye, everybody.